changing your life one story at a time. This is the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast with Editor-in-Chief Amy Newmark.
Hey, it's Amy Newmark with your daily dose of Chicken Soup for the Soul inspiration. It's Motivational Monday, and today I'm going to share a story that I think will give you a useful new perspective. I'm going to talk about volunteering. Now, we all know that volunteering makes us feel good. We've published hundreds of stories about volunteering that make it clear that the biggest beneficiary of volunteering is the person doing the volunteering, not the recipient of the volunteer work. In fact, therapists often recommend that people who are depressed or even suicidal take up volunteer work as a way of showing themselves that they add value to society, that what they do makes a difference. But I would like to suggest today that we go one step further. What about taking some of the things that you do, that you feel you are forced to do, and seeing if you can derive the same benefit from them that you would from voluntary volunteering? So here's my own example. I am the treasurer of my neighborhood tax district, which basically means that I run it. I carve out many hours each month to serve as the tax assessor, tax collector, bill payer, and tax return preparer. And I also manage the garbage collection and other services for the whole neighborhood. There are 19 homes, and almost everyone is wonderful, but there are always a few people who are difficult and find something to complain about. I can't really hand the job off to anyone either because it requires a lot of financial skills, which I do have from my decades on Wall Street. So I've been doing this somewhat thankless job in my neighborhood for 19 years. And a few years ago, someone asked me if I did volunteer work. And I said, no, I don't, because I'm so busy with work and visiting our 4 grown kids and a house and running my neighborhood association that I don't have time to do volunteer work. And then I realized, running the association is my volunteer work. And that changed how I looked at it. Because it's my volunteer work, now I don't really get aggravated when someone complains to me about the snow plowing or the trash pickup or whatever, because I remind myself that this is my volunteer work, and then it seems much more palatable. So I was talking to my friend Karen, and she was having a problem with an unwanted obligation of her own. She and her husband David were acquainted with this elderly lady, Rose, who fell ill and had no one else to help her. And Karen and David weren't related to Rose, but there didn't seem to be anyone else to help her, so they got stuck with it. And Rose was difficult and ornery. She would take them out for dinner, but then she would restrict what they were allowed to order. She would complain about everything that they did to help her. They moved her into an assisted living facility. They oversaw her medical care. They took her out for meals and errands. They moved her again into a nursing home. They were driving 2 hours each way to tend to Rose's needs, and it was cutting into their work days and their family time. Now, Karen and David had always been generous with their time and their resources, but they were really feeling overwhelmed by this. They weren't resentful of Rose because there wasn't anyone else who could step in and help, but they did feel that this obligation had taken over their lives. After all, Rose was just an acquaintance. So one day, Karen was telling me how hard this was, and I asked her if she did any volunteer work. And she said that she would like to, but she didn't have time because she was taking care of Rose. And then I said to her, well, Rose is your volunteer work. And that transformed Karen's attitude immediately. She didn't have 1 minute less work to do for Rose, but now she thought of it as volunteering. And Karen told David what I said, that this was their volunteer work, and she called me back to say that this changed everything for him too. So for the rest of Rose's life, Karen and David happily did their volunteer work. There's a great quote from the writer and artist Mary Engelbreit, who said, "If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it." And that certainly worked for Karen and David. And now here's your surprise ending. In her will, Rose left Karen and David almost $500,000. They had come to terms with caring for her. They were doing it willingly. It was their volunteer work. And then they got a huge reward anyway for their kindness when it was all said and done. Now, tomorrow is Tip Tuesday, and we're going to continue in the same vein, talking about how you spend your time. But tomorrow I'm going to give you a tip that will transform how you handle those pesky little tasks that you never seem to get done. I'm Amy Newmark. Thank you for listening to the Chicken Soup for the Soul podcast. And please make my producers happy and give us a review on the iTunes page because I don't want to hear them asking me anymore. And if you'd like to see our latest book about volunteering, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Volunteering and Giving Back, please go to our website, chickensoup.com.